Okay, well, let's get into our meeting. Welcome everyone that's joined us. We're on the tail end of the bylaws, and committees have had tremendous success in getting through this. Our goal and objective is to do the best that we can to get through our assignment. This is again a finance committee meeting. We have all members present, including Vice Chair Belknap that I asked to join today. Let me see who else is on here that also he's in training here. We have our new Secretary Civil Child is with us.
Yay.
Staff. It looks like we're ready to go. We don't have public comments or anything like this on this. This is work bylaws. This is all about us and a board. And I guess some background on this before we dive into it. Again, our opportunity or an assignment is Articles 6, 7, 8, and 9 of our bylaws. And there's been quite a bit of work put into these. We had some bylaws in the past, and they functioned okay with us, but then we find ourselves in some gray areas here and there, and then wish we had more definition or a better definition. So this is part of a process of an evolution, and as you have studied our bylaws, you'll see that the vice chairs, one of their duties, and this one right now is assigned to Vice Chair Belknap, but previously it was Vice Chair Brittany Clemens who worked with staff to put draft betterments together. And as a spin-off from that, Vice Chair Belknap has worked with staff, and maybe Vice Chair Belknap, are you with us now, or did you make a presentation?
No, I can talk to you. Maybe for
background before I turn this in. I
know I think
there's a lot out, but who on the team and etc.
Okay, we actually spent about 50 hours working on these bylaws to bring this new draft forward. And it was not myself, which I'd love to say it was, but it was myself, Vice Chair Davis, JAG Buse, Lorraine, and Jeff Van Holten, who worked on these together to try and bring something forward where you can look them over and see what we can do better. So that's where we are, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And we have most of those players.
Are you there?
Okay. Yep, I'm there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can I be heard?
We can hear you, Chair.
Oh, okay. I turned my video. I'm in the USB building, and I was in a meeting yesterday, and I thought it was good until the very end. I ended up turning my video off. But it shows good connection. Okay. So that's what leads us to where we're at today. And so one thing, some background is this moves out of committee, if it moves out, but it should move out. That the expectation is it goes before the full board. And in our next board meeting, there's a couple hours set aside to receive motions from committees on their sections. And then there'll be discussions, and if there's proposed changes, then we will navigate that way, following Robert's rules, of course. And eventually the finance committee's motions will come before the board. It takes 2/3 of our 2/3 vote to approve the bylaws. At the end of that, just so this is help to manage expectations. So at the end of those approval, then we'll repeal the old ones. So if we don't get our bylaws completely approved, then we have our old bylaws to keep us functioning. Is there any questions on procedure or process? Okay, so there's still another round outside of committee for input and proposed betterments. That's what I'm basically saying. Okay, so the best way for us to do this, and Ben Rasmussen, you're the driver of this, is that true?
Yeah, I'm driving.
You're driving. So our best thing we can do is we can start off with this is committee. We can start off with a motion, or we can just hit one article at a time, work through it, try, there can be consensus or whatever we need to do, but through this. And then at the end, go back through and move that article out of committee to the board.
Chair Huntsman,
Yes.
a lot of times I just had questions or clarifications, not necessarily, edits. I mean, I guess they may come to edits. So I guess what would be the most expedient? Just to go one article at a time?
I'm going to take one article at a time. If you have questions, resolve questions, discussions, and if it turns to something wordsmithing, then we can.
Okay.
Lorraine, your hand's raised. Am I saying something wrong?
No, I think that answered the question. You're actually the last standing committee to meet on this. So all the other committees did take one article at a time and then made motions on just that article. And I believe they're going to be presented one article at a time in board meetings. So rather than take the whole, just do one article at a time to be consistent with the other committees.
Okay. So we are being consistent. Thank you. AAG Buse, your hand's raised, and then we'll.
I was just going to give you, as you start off, number 1, 3, and 5 are exact language out of the statutes. So before you go into a lot of editing work or things like that, just note that 1, 3, and 5 are direct reading from statute.
Okay, and we're glad you're with us, because if we're saying something outside of statute, we're glad you're with us to call us out on it. So as we read these, we can see those references to statute too. So feel free to weigh in. So Board Member Norton.
My question might be mute based on what AAG Buse just said, but on line 237, it says in all others matters. And I wondered if that is correct, or if that was a typo with those 2 S's there, or if I'm not understanding the sentence correctly.
Uh-oh. What version?
Okay.
There's an extra S there in others that should be taken off. You're right, Kristen.
Okay. That was my only question about Article 6.
What version? I want to make sure I'm working off the right version. What draft should we be working off of?
There's a draft 1.
Okay.
And there's.
So the draft on the screen is basically the same draft you have, but it reflects the changes made in the other 2 committees. So the line number will be off, but otherwise it will be the same. So if you're looking for the line number, if you can glance on the screen, that would help. But
Perfect.
Otherwise, you can go off your draft.
And then last question, Chair, do you want us to raise our hands or jump in on this?
Yeah, I'll just. I think we'll just jump in. Ben, what do you think being the drive? What's the easiest for driving? Should we do the first? Should we start at the top of it and just not read it all, or should we just address each committee member's concerns? What's best for you, Ben?
I can go with whatever you need.
My first question would be line 244. Why do we need to specify that? Why is that specified? I mean, I would just assume that they would be participate in setting the agendas.
I'm pulling mine up. You're talking,
I can answer that if you would like.
yeah,
The agendas are normally set in the meeting in the month prior. So the January agenda would be set during this December normally. And so that's
Okay.
why it's put in there, so that we know that those new officers are going to be the ones who are participating in that.
Perfect.
so.
And then my
Go-
next question would be,
Coming out, some of us printed it off and wrote notes and everything, and so our numbers will be off. Is that correct? Ben, is that what you just said?
Yeah, they'll be off a little bit, but we can figure it out and I can help highlight it if there's any confusion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, please continue.
my next question then might be for legal. Can someone just, number 5, I understand it comes from statute. Can someone define cause for me as a non-legal person? Like,
Legally, it's not defined. And so it would be a violation of the law or of your bylaws that you felt were so egregious that you no longer, as a board, this is totally you as a board's discretion to be able to feel that your officers, you no longer feel confident that they're representing you and that you want them in authority. So it would be up to you as a board to determine what cause is.
so that generally doesn't need to be defined in the bylaws. You just kind of take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
If it, AG Quisenberry?
Yeah, the statute that this comes from similarly doesn't define cause. So it would be nice if we had some guidance from the statute of what it was, but we don't.
And then if no one else has someone,
Yeah,
do
let's
you have
finish
one, Mark?
concerns. Yeah, let's finish your question. Or
Mine go all the way down to appoint members to serve on, right there. So why, I'm just a person that likes to delete non-essential things. So a lot of times I just wonder why things are added, and that helps understand. But why does item on line 266, item 1, not cover all of the remaining items? Why do we spell out
Lorraine?
267 through 272?
This is really just a practical matter. There's no other places this would be listed. So if a new board chair comes in, it's just a practical matter for them to see my duties, these are the things I do. If not, and I have them as well as the secretary, but it really is a practical matter.
Are we worried that we leave them out if we don't?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
And
with
what kind of process do we have to make sure that that we add them as the legislature adds them? Is that just what?
We do review that after the session is over, and we're in the process of doing that.
But it doesn't have to be included in our bylaws. So I think that's how I see that as a nice placeholder for whoever's chairing.
And we do have to make some amendments during the year occasionally as we find things, those types of things, or reference changes, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And is that all of your questions on
Yes, it is.
on 6?
That's, yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions on 6? I didn't have, thanks for, I did my very best to try to catch typos because I never seem to be able to catch them at all.
Well, I
I
think
wonder
that's
if
probably
you
because you've
know.
read this so many times. And, that was a fresh read for me. So,
Well, thank you. But so there's an invitation out there for any committee. If you find something and you would like me to have just a little bit of glory and find in a typo, feel free to
let you know.
my way. I don't think I've ever had a victory in that, and I've tried hard.
Oh,
So if there isn't any other questions on Article 6, Brian, is there housekeeping or anything on here? Or?
Well, possibly. It's kind of a stylistic thing, but starting in subsection 6, so that would be on 248. It lists, as you can tell, A, B, C, D, E, so A through K, and each one begins with acting or with ing. So acting, chairing, calling, participating, facilitating, supervising, so on. And it seems to me that the syntax is more, it starts off in 6, duties of the board chair. So my suggestion would be act, like for example, in 6A, duties of the board chair, act as the official spokesperson, B, chair all meetings of the board. So I'm basically suggesting dropping the ing. C would be call additional meetings, D, chair the board, E, participate as a member, and so on. It's more of a stylistic thing, but I think it fits better with the subsection 247 where it says duties of the board chair. And it kind of goes on what Member Hart was saying, is less is more. It's just a small thing, but it's something I noticed if that interests anyone.
Well, that would have been so easy to shoot me a text.
And
I-
you could have been,
I could have been
The
Gloria.
hero.
you are my soul sibling with that. I just didn't know if that would have labeled me I love that. Please take those off. And
Okay,
Would that label you as a rebel, or what were you looking for there?
a grammarian.
there you go. Good catch. And I'm not seeing anybody objecting to.
I love it.
Is there anything else on Article 6? I'm trying to find my. Yeah. So if
But
there is-
Article 7 does the same thing as well.
yeah, we'll-
I-
so.
Yep.
Sorry, not Article 7, subsection 7.
Oh,
Duties of the board vice chairs. We've got acting and sharing.
We've got to change all those.
Wow, isn't
I
this going to be
don't have any
glorious?
others. What's that?
But isn't this going to be glorious if this is the most
Uh-huh.
difficult kind of things we have to do today?
Yes.
you know, it's so important to get it as best we possibly can. So this is what we do.
It needs to be professional.
Okay, Brian, you started this, so it all fits in here too, fine with you?
Yeah, I got a couple more if that's okay.
All in Article, or all in Article 6, correct?
Yes, sir. So,
Okay, Mara, your hand was, well, I saw it went down. Go ahead.
so the next one would be in subsection 6F. Facilitate the evaluation. Sorry?
No, we're good.
All right. Facilitate the evaluation process by the board of the board's direct report. I'm thinking just maybe a way to clarify that a little bit or simplify that a little bit. I would suggest the change of facilitate the evaluation process used instead of by. So used in addition to by. So used by the board for its direct report employees each spring. So inserting the word used, and then after board, inserting for its and deleting of the boards.
Okay, so I might be in like my 5th reading of that sentence to see if something doesn't sound right. So,
And then chair, let's see, or Ben, in line 254, it's got another ing. They're pointing. Yeah, so I would delete the ing. And then one last small change, in line 258, there it has cites to code 36-12-17. There's a subsection 1 that goes right in between the 17 and the D. So Ben, do you see that? So 36-12-17 paren 1 end paren, and then yeah, that's it right there. And then in JR, you got that one. And I believe, Chair, that's all that I have to comment on that.
Do you have to have the it's under 256 used by the board for it's? Can you just take out it's? Because I don't know. I don't like that word.
I like that.
Okay. All right, Brian, is there anything else on your proposed edit?
Well, Ben, if you scroll down to 7F, okay, you got both those ings, the initiating. Okay, no, I have nothing further with Article 6.
Can we go back, Ben, can we go to the beginning of Article 6 and then slowly scroll down? And we'll just pause on the proposed edits. I'll just say, I'll get you to move just a sec after I review them. I'll review them really slowly, allow the committee to see them.
Chair Huntsman,
Yes.
just a little note, I think another standing committee already did Article 5. So we'll have to, I'll look at that for sure, but I think this committee was supposed to start with 6.
Aren't we in 6?
Well, you were in 5, weren't you? Or
No,
No,
this is
we're in
6.
you're in
We're
6? Oh, I apologize then, sorry.
We're good. Boy, you put the fear in me. What am I doing? Being it, what? I don't have that in. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Scroll down, please. Okay. Oh, Laura or Vice Chair Belknap?
Are you ready for a motion, Chair?
No. Almost.
Okay,
Thank you for being a part of our committee. Okay, I have them
On
down.
item F, 7F, wouldn't the make still be a making and initiating? Review board bylaws annually, making sure board bylaws confirm and initiating amendment. It just sounds weird to say make sure. Is that incorrect?
I think the word
that-
might want to be ensure
Okay.
rather than make sure. Make sure is so
That
take
sounds
make
better.
make sure and put ensure instead of make sure.
Good catch. Okay, I've read them all 3 times. Sorry.
Hold on. Do we want to do in line 282 and 283? Do we want to say when that happens? Like what time of year?
it's kind of implied before
Okay,
the reviews. And so it's just, it's good that, that's how I saw it,
okay,
without saying
Chair
exactly.
Huntsman? Chair Huntsman, we didn't put an exact time in there because it probably needs to be near the end of the year after they put in their plan for the year, but it also needs to, we're never sure with what is coming on the board when that might be.
okay. Gotcha.
Thanks.
And it may vary too, depending on when salary raises are being considered as well.
Okay.
Okay. I think I would, well, I guess I'd seek we're to the end, so I'd be seeking a motion that the committee approve Article 6 and forward recommendations to the board for final approval. Somebody want to make that motion?
I move that we forward Article 6 to the board with the,
Let me state it again, and if you say
yes, please.
yes, then that's your motion, okay?
As
Perfect.
amended.
As amended.
Yes.
So I'll restate it. Let me write this down. That the committee approve Article 6 and forward recommendations to the board for final approval as amended.
Yes.
So we have a motion. We don't need a second. So the motion's from board member Hart here. Thank you. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Okay.
Aye.
Sorry, aye.
Aye.
Hi. Hi.
Okay. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, Article 6 is moving out from in front of me here. Moving to Article 7. Questions from board members?
I have a question on area 5 here on line A. It's talking about adding items to the board agenda. And in A, it says that it is identified how the item fits with the duties and responsibilities of the board. And I have no problem with that, but I just wondered if that would be a place that we could insert something like the strategic plan. Do we need to bring the strategic plan into our discussions of how our agendas work or not?
That is an interesting idea. I personally like it, but what does it say in statute about our responsibilities? I guess is where I would start.
Let's ask her, if we limit the scope to our strategic plan only.
Oh,
That
well,
was my question. I wondered how much, yeah, if there's many outside of the strategic plan that
there might be
could,
issues.
or
You're muted, Laura.
I was just talking to myself, actually. I was saying we could probably include all of them, Kristen. I love this idea that for either duties and responsibilities or the board strategic plan, it can fit all of those. So I appreciate the way Ben's written that here.
yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. Or I think it's a brilliant idea. I get frustrated when we might be going off into something that we haven't established as a priority.
You know what I also like about it is it's a little bit evidence-based in our policy
Mhm.
after coming back from a OLAG audit
Mhm.
around strategic plan. Okay, are you guys in the strategic plan business besides what's in statute, and it's right in our bylaws? So I like it also. I'm not seeing any objection to it, so thank you.
I had a question, also on, well, now I gotta find the line. Hold on. Oh, it's just a question. I don't
Yeah.
think I have an improvement, but on 293, what timelines are they talking about there?
So within the executive committee, and that we set rules of engagement of, well, I'll let Lorraine speak to it. See, we only have Lorraine for a couple more months here, and I
know.
that she has, and she definitely can speak very well to this because she lives in this space. Lorraine.
Okay, after the board sets their agenda for the year, then I go through and actually make a schedule of when agenda items are due. The memos are due to civic clerk, when the backup is due. And that way we have deadlines for staff. It's really deadlines for staff, but also board members as well. If you have an item you want to submit for the next board meeting or for one down the line, it has to be submitted by a certain time to be considered by the board executive committee for putting on the agenda. So it just makes things very organized. It's really an organizational tool.
So is it that chart that you sent out that said when backup is due and when,
Yes.
So is that adding an agenda item, or is that adding details once an agenda item has been established?
Lorraine.
Well, initially, it's a little bit different for staff. Staff have to put a memo into civic clerk, and that has some detail in it. The backups with the more in-depth detail is due a little later. But for board members, if they were making a request, it would be, say, the same date the memos are due would be when a board if a board member's requesting or 3 members requesting, you would want to get your memo of request or your email of request in by that time.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
Got one in this section, whenever.
So let's finish with board member Moss. Let's finish with board member Hart, and then we'll go to yours.
Yep.
Sorry, Moss.
No. You got it.
The number 6, let me find it. Okay, where is subsection 1?
But that should be subsection 5 and not
Okay.
subsection.
Okay. That's it for me.
Okay. Member Moss.
Thanks. This is the one that we discussed. I bounced this off Chair Huntsman. It was 281. It's sub D2. So let's see. 5B. I'm sorry, 5D2. So now it's 306. Yeah, there we go. So I understand the purpose of this is to ensure that there is, some cohesion behind a request to put something on the agenda, and it requires 3 board members. I was concerned with the language where it says that the requesters, and that would be 3 board members, shall agree with and share the same position as the other requesters on the agenda item. And I was concerned whether that could be read to say that the 3 people who want to consider something on the agenda would have to have the same position about the outcome on that agenda item. And talking to Mark, it seemed like perhaps the intent was that those 3 members would share the same position about the need to consider that item. And they might have a difference of opinion about what to do with the item, but I think the idea is you want 3 people that really think we ought to consider this. And then there might be some disagreement, it goes to the board. So that would be, I guess, a question combined with a suggestion is that we might say something like, requires three to agree with and share the same position regarding the need for consideration of the item or something to that effect.
Okay, Laura, do you want to speak to this? Because I know you guys spent some time on this.
Yeah,
Also,
we did spend quite a bit of time, and I actually agree with Jen that we need to make sure that it's really clear. But I'll tell you what's happened is even on one of mine, I agreed with the person, but then when they sent the request in, it was not at all what I thought we had talked about. So what we're trying to do is eliminate that from being the concern. So if someone here can help us wordsmith that the three people who want this are they're wanting the same thing, and then with clarity as to what that is, which we have listed below. So is somebody helping us here? Because I appreciate Jim's insight here.
And I also, that makes much more sense. I was kind of confused about that item. So the agenda memo would need to be signed by those three people, correct?
recognized and endorsed by the three, and then their three names are on the memo as being the advocates or the petitioners to have it move forward. I'm not sure the right word there, but
And I think that would be mitigated if you had to have a signature on that agenda memo, because then it wouldn't be forwarded without my consent. And I could say, whoa, before you submit it, that's not, I think that's a fail safe. Now, I don't want somebody going and saying, oh, I'll include your name on a memo. That I need to be able to see that memo. I don't need there to be a process that includes my name without final approval.
if there's a memo, for an example, if there's a memo.
What about
and then
signing though?
You'd say, and you put your name on it in concurrence, whether it's in an email or however it is.
Yeah.
It's difficult to get those hard signatures, but
Right.
your message attached to the memo, that's one. You get three people, that's three. And then we're safe. There's just too many times it doesn't meet the expectation of the people that are requesting it, and it should.
Yeah. I think they're just,
Maybe instead of saying sign, could we say submit?
yeah, or
But there's some, yeah.
Maybe that's just semantics.
To ask Lorraine on the way these are submitted, you're on the receiving end and the chair or chair leadership's on the receiving end. Is that sufficient to say submit, or do we need to have something more than that? Because for me personally, I want to see that I want to see a communication with that board member's endorsement behind it.
I think maybe think of it in two different ways. Think of it in the request from board members. You really need the request, which might not necessarily be in that board memo format that's in Civic Clerk. So maybe you list them out separately. The request needs to have all members requesting verify that they agree with that request in some way. And then the memo, I would still say be listed for inclusion in the agenda memo. That's the one that goes in Civic Clerk, and it would be clear that these board members requested this in that memo. But I think the request is kind of separate from that actual memo in Civic Clerk. So I would add.
I think I should be everybody, and then second, it should be listed as an inclusion, and third, they should all consider the same, or would that be number 2 and number 3 would be the inclusion, Lorraine?
I would probably say the one that's I should be last. So you'd have the request first with all it on the request, or maybe it's just 2 items. Maybe the request would be the first item, and then say all share the same position on the request. So all requesters shall be on the, or shall verify or something. I don't know how to word that, but yeah, the memo itself, I think should be the last one because that comes after the request.
Board Member Moss, is this meeting your expectation in adding clarity in this space?
Yeah, thank you. Yep. It's very helpful. You know, I'll just make an interesting side note here. When we were all, campaigning to delegates a year ago, I actually had people bring up that, and question always is, what would you like us to do on the board, And one of them was to stick more closely to Robert's rules and limit off-topic discussions. So I was kind of surprised that was a voter, consideration. You typically hear more about the heavy substantive policy items, but I think that this goes to something that people are asking for out there. Perhaps a little surprisingly, maybe you veterans on the board already know that that's something that is on people's radar, but I was a little surprised. So I think this helps.
It's amazing. Our board meetings are on a lot of people. But I think this is a betterment, and if there is something that brings it forward in a very positive way as maybe a proposed betterment and a little less of a debate dialogue kind of thing, or other reasons that somebody might want to put it on. But this will help all 15 board members know the intent and be prepared, and also even be in a position to support and or a better position to debate against. It just helps pre-grease a little better, stronger intent. Vice Chair Belknap, your hand's raised.
So Ben, we also need to take the little I right now and move it down to quad I's and be listed in inclusion in the agenda memo, because that's one thing that Lorraine was saying, because it needs to be listed in the inclusion at the end of this, after the request, then it needs to go there. And because that's then going into civic clerk.
Ben, your speed is impressive.
All right, is that where you want it now?
Verify the request. Yes.
I like it. Board Member Moss, are you good?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Other Board Member Moss, you have an additional concern on this? Is any additional concerns on Article 7?
No, I think. Let's see. Oh, I had one.
We did have one on the old 332.
Yeah, correct. That's still part of 7, isn't it? So that's sub I, 13I.
Oh, yes.
358 now. So, yeah, should I address that one? Is that one up next?
Well, yeah, we're just moving through, so
Okay.
I am inventoried some of your concerns from a previous conversation, so I just want to make sure they get out here. That was
Yeah,
one.
thank you. If
And
that's the next one up.
AAG abuse would probably best to answer it, but go ahead.
So my concern was that it just seemed a little vague in what was meant by abide by. And I think, and this is one I did bring up with Chair Huntsman, my understanding is that, once we as a board make a formal decision, board members are still free to express their own opinion as long as they make clear it's their own opinion and not the board opinion. And so, if a constituent says, what's the board's position and what's your position? You're sometimes saying, well, we took a vote and here's our position. Well, do you like that? Well, I had some disagreements and I might vote to do it differently next time. That's where I stand. As far as I know, that's fine. And it's the importance is to clarify when we're speaking for the board and when we're speaking for ourselves. And so the phrase abide by a decision of the quorum of the board just seemed a little vague. I don't know what that means, whether it means you can't express an opinion contrary on your own behalf or what that word was meant to do.
Well, and I had a concern with the second part, or more of a question, really. What does it mean to retain the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels? I mean, I think I might get it, but I don't understand why it's in board bylaws in this particular location and what we're adding other than maybe some confusion or lack of clarity.
Do you care if we go to Michelle? I think Michelle might have some insight here. Michelle, I'm not throwing you under the bus.
Well,
Yes,
I had it on there as the go-to because I can't speak to the word abide, but
I can speak to kind of where the discussion that we had on this is we looked at other boards and the National School Boards Association recommendations on this, and they were across the board. There were some that were much stricter than this, that said, I will support the decision of the board once the board makes a decision. And so the group of us tried to find something that was a little more in the middle and said, we don't want people actively acting against a decision that the board made. So when we say abide by, we don't want you actively encouraging employees or LEAs not to abide by the decision the board made. But if you feel like you want to go seek legislative change, or you want to continue to work through your fellow board members to have it heard again, those are fine things. But they didn't feel comfortable putting this as strict as some of the other boards did by saying board members will support. And so they chose abide as a sort of in-between word. So I hope that gives you at least a background of where it was coming from and realizing that there wasn't a super firm decision and needed your input on this. But that's where we were kind of heading. And if you can give some better clarification to it, that's wonderful.
so as I read this, and I put myself, well, I might be considered a veteran board member, but if I was a new board member, as I read this, it's basically telling me as a board member that I need to support, basically support or not object to the decision that the board has made or they take an action on, and I need to respect that. This is what I'm reading this is that middle ground piece. However, I still, in any way I can, by following board policy and procedure, any opportunity I can that the rule or whatever is come back up, I'm gonna follow that procedure instead of advocating in other ways of interfering with the board's work as it's being rolled out to LEAs and educators or whatever the particular thing was. That's how I take it as guidance that I need to have in my bylaws or should be in our bylaws to help me as a board member, guide me into that space of if I was a no vote, what's my next step? But
Why is this, I guess one of my questions is this the right place for it? Why is it in the section on meetings and not on ethics or the role of board members?
I think because it was in response to in a board meeting when the board takes a vote.
Oh, okay.
What about, I think the concern that's being raised is that you respect it in the sense of not mental or emotional assent to it. You might dissent from it. That's your own freedom of thought, but you need to comply with it and not encourage people not to comply, right? And so I wonder if that's kind of the difference is rather than abiding, it's comply with and support compliance with or something like that. We're not trying to address what people think.
I love the word compliance because it's
Me too.
not gray at all. So,
Huntsman, I think this actually may be a little bit of a repeat from something that's in the board member ethics section. If you look at section 12 and 13, it talks about once the board has voted on an issue, the vote reflects the official position of the board. And then 13 says members may express personal opinions on issues and goes on from there. So I don't know if it's needed in both places, but I just wanted to point out that it does address it in another section.
That goes to Molly's point, I think.
So I wonder if you, since it's in the voting of the board, that we just put the first part in here and don't put the last part, which seems to touch more on ethics, but that we either support or we abide, or can you find that in the ethics ban so we can read it exactly so we're not missing anything?
the other question I have while that's coming up for AEGs, the difference between comply and abide.
I think that's a preference that you have. I mean, I can look up the Google definition for you and we can look at that. But this is something that is for you as board members to decide what you're most comfortable with.
Well, I see abide by, well, board member Moss brought it out to comply with, but I didn't have a hang up with abide. I'm just curious if
I just take a look. I can share if you want.
well, I interrupted the other direction while they were trying to find
The
Ben,
lines 134 through 139 are the lines that Lorraine is talking about. You could ask Law and Licensing to further refine that when they have their second meeting on Tuesday.
the other thing is
We'll be
we
discussing that.
we can strike this and somebody here, whether it's board member Moss or someone can make note that when this comes before the full board, that we can seek that betterment, a proposed betterment.
I just think that those issues need to all be in the same place. When you run into problems is when there's multiple statements in different places of documents. I don't know.
I still appreciate that, Molly and Jim. So Chair, what if we took this section and maybe had Ben give this back to Chair Lear, because they have not finished that section yet, and have her see if there's verbiage from this they want to use or not.
Well, in our meeting, we can eliminate that piece.
Yeah.
With passing on that because we don't want redundancy in our bylaws, that to see if they will consider this in their meeting. If they don't, then we still have a place to consider it. It's not the end. It's in our last chance. So what I'm hearing is if we take that out.
We can leave that note for law and licensing and then strike the paragraph from your article.
That's what I think we're proposing here.
I like proposing that, just so that that's all under ethics rather than being somewhere in the section on meetings. I wouldn't go to a section on meetings if I had a question about that type of issue.
And I'll just, one quick comment.
Yes.
If we are relaying to them any concerns that we raised, I was just looking up Merriam-Webster, and this is kind of where abide took me. One definition is to accept without objection. And that's sort of what comes to me. And so a board member on an individual level might object. They might say, yeah, I voted no. And, you know, does that put them at odds? And so I think comply is, you know, more accurate because it goes to your actions and doesn't, you know, prevent you from speaking if you have a different opinion in your individual capacity. That seems to be the key.
I agree. Abide is the wrong word for that. It's got a connotation that wouldn't fit here.
Okay, well, we'll strike this out and move it over, but AEG Quisenberry, your hand's up.
I was just going to ask Member Moss if you swap abide by with respect, if that kind of gets you where you want to.
I don't like that either. That to me is demanding mental assent to something that you may not respect. You may accept it in the sense that you're going to comply and not go around telling people, hey, ignore that because I thought they were all crazy. But respect to me is a mental assent issue. It sets off that weird Jeffersonian twitch that you're being asked to mentally approve something that you might object to. So I don't know. The other committee could probably figure it out.
No, I agree. It's comply is an action, and you can have evidence of that. You can't measure somebody's respect for something, but you can measure their compliance.
I'm fairly certain I voted for things that board members might think are just loony and not respect it. And yet, you know, we all say, okay, that's the policy and we're going to comply. So I don't,
right.
That's kind of where I'm going.
So would the two of you feel okay if Ben wrote out there that we are looking at the word comply rather than abide, and then they can take it where they want it?
Go for it.
That seems right to me.
Okay, thank you. So further into Article 7. So there was a question. Oh, go ahead. But I had a question for AAG Buse to help us understand, or Brian. I have it on line 353, 354. So are you going to talk about that, Jim? That question you had?
Yeah, you bet. The one about consensus?
Yeah, consensus. This is about consent calendar.
So this is kind of a procedural question, but also just a question of intent, I guess. And it's E3. So now line 379. My question there, and I understand the consent calendar process from the charter board and this board, that, you know, things are put on there where some decision has been made, and unless somebody has an objection, then we approve it and let it go through. And if you don't, then you pull it off. I was just curious what the language means when it can go on consent if it's been previously discussed, for which a consensus has been reached, but that still needs an official vote. And going back to our procedures, how is there any evidence of consensus if an official vote has not been taken? And Chair Huntsman clarified, I think, that sometimes we generally like something, but we ask staff to go back and come with more information, and then we feel like we'll probably support it. But I'm just not sure what that means. It looked like a little bit of clairvoyance or something. If there's not been a vote, how would anybody know there's consensus?
The only time that I can think of that happening is when you have your discussion in closed session and have a consensus that you reach in closed session, because we do not vote in closed session, but we do say, you know, is there anyone who feels inclined to make a motion against this, or feels inclined to, or is very opposed to this? So we do take sort of a discussion and a consensus there. And then they are a consent calendar that comes before you for the UPAC items. There are a group of them that come to you as a consent calendar item that you vote for. And those are the instances and times when you've previously discussed it, you've reached a consensus, but you still have to take a vote, and it comes to you as the UPAC consent calendar.
Got it.
And I think we've also done it in the past where we've had, it might have been a contract or some kind of award, but it was lacking something. And so it was, something was missing or something had to be added, or one more piece, and that piece gets added. Am I speaking out of context?
Yes, we've done that before. A contract has been pulled because one of the board members will have noticed something that was a concern that needed to be addressed in the language of the contract, and the board, as a consensus, felt like, yes, if that was changed, we would feel okay about it. So then the next time that change is made and it's just put on consent calendar.
I wonder if we might say something like a tentative indication of consent. I just don't, again, I know we're being nitpicky here, but that's just kind of a word that might trip up in a situation other than the one you're describing. Maybe it's just me, maybe there's no problem there. A tentative consensus has been indicated or something to that effect. I mean, it just didn't describe how that consensus would have been known if there's no vote. I get what you're saying, and so as a practical matter, that makes perfect sense. It just kind of,
the known part for me is where it says it was previously discussed. So the board member would have to try to recall when it was previously discussed, and or if they were absent, assume it was previously discussed. To board member Moss' concern. I don't know a way to make it better than.
I like it with the changes there, because you're right, a tentative consensus would only be indicated. You haven't reached consensus until you take a vote.
And you, if I may, Chair,
Yes.
you may want to even consider just deleting 3, because anything that comes under 3 is probably already going to come under 2. Because you're basically just saying it's the same thing, that it's a non-controversial item, so we don't have to talk about it. It seems to me 2 already covers what 3 is trying to cover.
But it can still be pulled off the consent. So you're absolutely right. I think number 3 was probably created. I don't know why it was created. Never mind. I can't come up with. I can see where it fits in number 2 also.
I do know that Jeff Van Holten did some research on consent calendar items in other states, I think, and that may have come from that. I, don't want to speak for him with him not there, but he had researched some of the things around consent calendar, because we did want to put some conditions. So that probably came from his research.
Well,
It could be a controversial item. The only thing in 2 that I could see where you've discussed something in closed session that was controversial, and you're needing an official, you might have come to a consensus, but it still needs an official vote.
It would be very rare we would take something from executive session and put it on consent.
Yeah.
That's ever happened. That generally doesn't happen. So I think that would be pretty rare.
But we do
I did the UPAC stuff though is I was thinking about the consent calendar at the beginning of the meeting, but I forgot about the consent calendar at the end.
Even if you were going to take something from executive session the previous meeting, I think that would probably fall under number 4 too.
Ah. All right, so strike it. Or
Let's take it out. And then I still want to circle back with Jeff
mhm.
and get a little more context on it. So let's take it out for now. Lorraine, will you, or still, will you make a note to myself to circle back with Jeff on this in case I forget?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
I don't like the implication that we've talked about something and come to a consensus. That, I don't know. I think everything needs to be transparent, and it kind of indicates that you're taking a vote about something I realize it doesn't say. Anyway, we can move on.
Taking a vote without taking a vote, which is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just
I
sounds odd.
Okay, it's out. Did you have anything else, Board Member Mott?
Oh.
Well, let me finish up with.
One more down on D, but that may be after. One more on 20D, but somebody else may have one before that.
Let's do yours and we can jump back up. So finish short, then we'll.
Okay. To 20D, that used to be line 390. It's about this closed meeting question. Where'd it go? There we go. 416 now. A member may not participate in a closed meeting electronically when the meeting is held in person. So again, Chair Huntsman helped me understand this one. I was just curious on this. I know there are restrictions in terms of ensuring a closed, session and appropriate notice and that type of thing. I was just curious, now that we've been experimenting with closed Zoom meetings for a while, whether it's possible to have more flexibility here, that where we have a closed meeting, there might be most of us in person and somebody else electronically. And I guess, I don't know, maybe Member Norton or somebody else who's more remote might weigh in. I don't even know exactly when this would come up. My office is 2 blocks from the board office, so I can pretty much show up for anything. But is there any flexibility now that we've kind of mastered this remote thing that might apply to a mixed version of a closed meeting?
I think Lorraine can answer this, and then my response back then to Board Member Moss was, I believe I don't know if it's in Robert's rules or in statute, what's required of assurances that the organization keeps something in a certain space. But Lorraine, do you want to comment?
Part of it, and we do have that happen all the time. There's quite often when we were meeting in person, there was a board member participating by phone. The issue is really a practical one. When you're in the big meeting, you're on microphones and people outside the room can hear you. When you go into closed session, you're not on microphones. And there's really no way for someone on the phone to hear you or for you to hear that person. So it's really that practical matter. There's kind of not a great way to do it.
Does that apply to Zoom as well?
Yes, because you wouldn't be able to, Zoom would run through the board system, which is mic'd. And without those microphones, the people on Zoom wouldn't be able to hear what anyone in the room is saying.
So like yesterday, we had our committee, or the day before yesterday, whichever day, we had the committee meeting split. Part of it was Zoom and part of it was in person. But in order for the people on the Zoom meeting to hear us, each one of us had to speak into a live mic so that the person who was on the Zoom calls, Board Member Klein, would be able to hear us.
And then the other part of this, and maybe our AAGs can weigh in from chairing and a chair's perspective, when you're into the executive session, that you have all these you put these assurances in place as best you can, that doors are closed, mics are off, all mics are off. People that were in your room as they left didn't leave devices that would be recording your meeting. And as we've had earlier discussions before Teams and Zoom and all of this, is how do we put assurances in place that what's happening in our executive session isn't being shared with the rest of the world. And my understanding was as we were rolling out into this COVID space, that the statement that we talk about having a remote meeting protected us from a little bit from anybody holding us accountable in our executive sessions by remote, so that as an organization we can do our very best to assure the compliance side of it, and we know that compliance went at risk through our pandemic. So can our AGs speak to anything that might be in law or in statute centered around executive session and those expectations of confidentiality and compliance?
Sure, I can just add that I just quickly reviewed the Open and Public Meetings Act regarding closed meetings and electronic meetings, and there's nothing there that gives us any direction or any requirements. So that tells me that what Lorraine indicated really kind of governs this issue, and that is what's practical, what can be done is really what's driving this. It's not necessarily a legal requirement.
Okay, but are we to assure anything when we, as an agency, when we go into executive session, that there is a compliance side that we as board members don't share, record, and that, but how do we?
If you're talking about the notice that we read, or that I think you or Lorraine reads at the beginning of me, I think you actually, whoever conducts reads that. No, I don't think we need to read that in the beginning of a closed meeting, because
No, my point is,
So
and
the things that we talk about in closed session have to be kept confidential. And in the past, another one of the issues was, if someone's on the phone, how do I know that people in their family aren't hearing those confidential issues? And we've really had to accept and trust one another with this Zoom thing, feeling like, we all do it. We all go into that closed session and we just trust that everybody else who is there is closing the door so that whoever is in the house isn't hearing it too. And in the past, that was a second reason why we didn't allow someone who was on the phone, because we didn't have Zoom. They were on the phone for board meeting, because there's a way that they can call in and they can hear when we talk on this microphones. But that was another reason why we didn't include them on the phone conversation, was because there was no assurance of confidentiality and where they were. If they were driving in the car and their spouse was sitting next to them, or, if they were at home and other people could hear the call, we just really were trusting one another.
well, not only there's a certain level of trust, but there's also our meetings are recorded, and there's an expectation that when we're face to face in an executive session, that we are not recording and inventorying as members the conversation that could be used outside of it. So I'm not trying to be the bad guy here of the super policeman, but I want to be in compliance and with law, and then also want to make sure we meet the expectations that we all have in a closed meeting, speaking of confidential items. So I think to board members, Moss thing is, so why not have them electronic?
Well, and
So-
that was actually my question too. So what you're saying is it boils down to the ability maybe for additional members to participate is weighed against the ensuring or needing to make sure that we're complying with a closed meeting. I have the same question. So basically you may be excluding members from being able to participate if they cannot be in a meeting physically. And I think some of our experiences, I mean, I've not been in a closed session that wasn't on Zoom, so I don't have those same preconceived ideas, I guess, or preconceived experiences.
Well, here's an example of, since I have been here, we have had an instance where we had a board member who took things that were said in closed session about an individual that we were potentially disciplining and went directly to that person and told them everything that was said in that closed session. And how easy it would have been for that board member who did that, if it was on the phone, to just push record, or on Zoom to push record. And I hate that there are instances when you can't trust, but it happens. In my experience, it has happened, and I have only been there a little over 2 years. So that is so easy to record, where we are not to record certain parts of it at all.
Well, I think
That's
the other,
highly unethical.
So,
I think the other issue is just that practical. And for those of you who have not met in the boardroom, it's very hard to hear in there when you're not on a microphone, even for those in the room. For those on Zoom, I think it would be almost impossible. Those on the phone could in no way hear what is being said, and we can't hear them. So there's no way to hear and communicate when you're on the phone, when the microphones go off, and they have to go off, or you compromise confidentiality.
It kind of sounds like it's sort of one or the other, perhaps in person or Zoom. And the Zoom option, we've been doing it and accepting a bit of a risk because we had to, but you're sort of saying that once we don't have to, want to eliminate that risk and bring it back to in person. Is that kind of the?
well, that's
There's not a good combo. In other words, that takes the best of what we've learned. And like I said to Mark, I think we're all trying to figure out, now that we had to do all this stuff, what good options came out of it that can make us more flexible going forward. But I hear the concerns about this form of flexibility. It creates a risk and communication problems. So I understand. I appreciate walking through that.
As do I.
I have another question on this, because I don't think we can't secure anything if a board member just decides to speak whatever was there. I mean, a board member could record it while we're in executive session, even sitting there with the technology we have today. So I don't think we're trying to eliminate that. But my question is, when you were in the boardroom
That's
today,
a true
were you on
statement.
mic? Were you on mic today, Mark?
So if you, as a
In
board,
our
decide
last
that you would like to have someone participate electronically, and you're willing to, you weigh those different options and risks, and that's how you feel and vote as a board, these are your rules. These are your bylaws.
yeah. So Laura, you had a question for me on my 1 o'clock?
I do. And Michelle, I appreciate that. So were you on mics today when we were having that meeting? In the
Yes, I
boardroom?
had to have Mike.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So I think it would be very difficult for someone to hear. So thank you.
So, and I also, my comment that I've made earlier, so I'll just share with the group, is I can see committee meetings that have to happen. I see that option of using technology, and that we've got people spread all over the state. But I think in our board meetings, the intent was that we would be together as best we can, and if circumstances are that we can't make the meeting, that I think with technology the way it is right now and the betterments in technology, we can make our meetings, whether we're present or not, all except that executive meeting where we don't take action.
And technology might catch up with us sooner
Right.
rather than later, and we can revisit this, but I do hear that the risks outweigh the benefits. Although I think those risks probably, we're kind of deluding ourselves if we think that people can't just go ahead and record it anyway. I mean, that just falls under ethics. That's not, you you can't, at the end of the day, I don't know, but are we ready for a motion?
Well, I think you want to walk, there wasn't a ton of changes in here, but I'd entertain a motion that the committee approves Article 7 and forward recommendations to the board for final approval as amended.
Here.
I'm seeking a motion. Oh, hang on. Brian.
Sorry, I didn't think you had gotten through all the board members' comments, but I got a couple here, if you don't mind.
Oh, hang on. I'm not seeking a motion now. So go ahead.
Sorry. All right, so subsection 5A. Let's see, so the little 1, little 2, Ben, those are capitalized, whereas the little 1, little 2, and 305, 306 are not capitalized. So just for consistency's sake, I would suggest not capitalizing it. And then 5B, it says it is, and this is line 302, it is identified if the item is for information. Is a little wordy. I would suggest we insert whether, and then it is identified if. So you're swapping out 1, 2, 3, 4 words for one. So again, Ben, it'd be whether instead of it is identified if. So the line would read whether the item is for information, discussion, or action. So looking at more context for 5 references the following conditions.
Not sure if that totally makes sense though, Brian, with the paragraph above.
How so?
Under the following conditions, whether, maybe it does, I don't know. It kind of sounds weird.
Whether the item is for information, discussion. All right, well, it's just a suggestion for consideration. And then subsection 7 seems redundant with subsection 4. So subsection 4 talks about agenda items may be added to the board meeting agenda consistent with the timelines established by the board executive committee in consultation with the board secretary. That's 4. And 7 says standing committee chairs and the superintendent shall submit board agenda items to the board executive committee consistent with timelines established by the board executive committee. So they seem a little repetitive to me. Does anyone else see that, or am I?
Looks to me like the only difference is that we've got standing committee chairs down in 7, whereas up in 4 is more of a general. But other than that, it looks like they're exactly the same.
Yeah, so in 7, it's standing committee chairs and superintendent can submit the agenda items. In 4, it's just agenda items may be added. So 4 seems a little more general, all inclusive. 7 seems like it's targeted just toward committee chairs and superintendents.
But would it need to be stated? I mean, yeah, I don't, if 4 covers everything, then we probably don't need to add that standing committee chairman can also do that, and the superintendent, because they are already.
Yeah,
everybody.
Well,
Um,
and I think the item 4 was the one that I was questioning. And the intent of that seems to be, from what was said, that was put in there because of timeline, like that's talking about the timeline. And then 7 seems to be the who. So as long as we're talking about who and how, we don't need to have it twice.
So the who and how is, if we jump back up,
Because number 4 was when y'all explained like the deadlines that are put forth by Lorraine. And it sounds like when you read it, the point of 7 is who submits those. So just say it once and it'll be okay, but
Michelle, do you remember any discussion when the writing group got together on these two provisions?
Nothing's coming to mind about why why both of them are there separately right now. I'm sorry, that's not that we didn't have that discussion, but I cannot remember a reason.
and
why.
I don't
And is
remember
it
that
pos-
either.
Is it possibly because standing committee chairs and superintendents don't need to have additional people? Whereas, everybody else would need to have 3 people?
No, that's covered in another. I think just having 4 is general. That means staff, superintendent, standing committee chairs, everybody. It's pretty
Okay,
much everybody
I
needs to
agree.
submit things by the deadlines. So I think 4
I
would
like it's a good catch. Well, it looks good.
Yeah,
I can't see a reason to have it twice if it's like what's being proposed.
sure. The other few comments I have is subsection 16, Ben. I don't know what the new line is on that. Let's see. There it is. So subsection 16. So it's line 3. Consent calendar. Actually,
Well-
it's 15. It's been changed a little bit. So 367, line 367. Public participation at board meetings is invited, consistent with board. It seems a little wordy to me, so I would suggest we swap out invited, consistent with pursuant to. So it would read, public participation at board meetings is pursuant to board administrative rule, so on and so on. And I looked, and that rule addresses how the public is invited, and it has a lot more detail about the public.
even take out board administrative rule. Everybody knows what R277 means, don't they?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, there you go. Is pursuant to. Okay, and then the last one I have is
Wait a minute, should it be R or is?
participation is.
Is
That's,
pursuant, is pursuant.
yeah.
Yes.
And then the last one I have, Chair, is, it was 17E, but it might be 6. Then keep going. Oh no, it is E. There you go. So starting on line. I know it's stricken. All right, never mind. It was need, should be need. It's there on line 380. Should be but we struck that altogether. So that's all the comments I have.
Thank you, Brian. Any other proposed changes? Seeing none.
Let me just make sure, Mark. I had one that went to what used to be line 521. Is that a sub? Let me just.
That's a different article.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So where I was before, Brian had his suggestions here, but I can't remember, somebody wanted to be moving a motion forward, but I put a motion, so I believe I could state. Do we want to walk through this one more time or scan through it? I'm not seeing anyone saying yes to it, because I can remember our journey.
I'm good with it.
Okay,
I'd gladly make a motion.
yeah, you want to make the motion?
Well, I want you to say it, and then I want to say
Okay.
yes.
All right. I'm seeking a motion that the committee approve Article 7 and forward recommendations to the board for final approval as amended.
So moved, yes.
We have we don't need a second. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are moving to Article 8. You guys are probably paperless. I envy you guys. I have to. Oh, very good. Hey, thank you. I see people with multiple screens, and they're good at putting their notes, and
Oh, I've got multiple screens.
but be able to throw their notes. Okay, we are 8. Who wants to start with any concerns or recommendations?
I just have a grammatical thing for 1A. I believe there needs to be a comma after vice chairs.
Are you on that, Ben? I am terrible at the comma police. In my office, I have great staff that is fantastic at making sure there's plenty of them, and others that want to have them removed.
Mark, a comma is nothing more than a traffic sign that causes you to pause. It is the yellow light of punctuation. If when you speak out loud, you pause, then it deserves a comma.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of pauses.
Then you shall have a lot of commas. And that is fine because I support the Oxford comma.
Okay. So let me just, on a quick thing of time, we started what, at 2, was this at 2:30, and we're trying to be done at 5:30, was that right?
Mhm.
All right, so you guys are we're doing good. We still have work to do. So, questions?
I have one clear at the end, if nobody else has any on.
That's where I was at. I'm going through all my. So why don't you?
I don't have a, well, I might later, but I have a general issue in that I would like to clarify and just overall, the definitions of the different groups that we have and their roles. I think we had this,
Seem like
you know,
ad hoc and
yes.
what we've
Let-
been
Yes.
talking about.
Lorraine, your hand's raised.
Yes, and it wasn't for this item actually, but I would say that the definitions of all these groups are in policy. There's a board policy on advisory groups that have those definitions. The item I had was clear up at the top, but I can come back after everyone's.
So one thing that I like about our bylaws, and we'll amend them as groups come in and out, it's a great inventory that we don't forget what's
Yes.
in different places. And so as statute adds something, we amend our bylaws, and it helps me, and I believe others.
It's not the individual groups, so to speak. It's okay, if it's an advisory group, these are the conditions of an advisory group. If it's an ad hoc group, these are the conditions. And it came up, of course, with the whole online thing and whether that was an ad hoc group or an advisory group. And it was quite a bit into that process where I learned, and this is new board member problem, but that an advisory group actually had a definition somewhere in rules, statutes, somewhere. But it almost seems like we need a matrix. So if we want board participation on the group, then it's called this kind of group. And if it's to simply problem solve, then it's this kind of group. And if it goes away in a certain amount of time, it's this kind of group. I just feel like that's kind of nebulous and seems like it might benefit from some clarity. And I think the definitions probably exist. I just think we should probably consider putting them in one space.
Okay.
So the definitions are all in one space and they're in a policy, and I can read them to you right now. I pulled that up if you want me to read them to you. But all of those definitions.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what policy they're in?
Yes, they're in policy USBE, your board policies 1004. It's called advisory groups. And it has the definitions of all of those and the distinctions between them at the beginning of that policy.
Thank you.
Okay, Lorraine, is your hand raised on?
This is on a different item, and it's right. So maybe if I could just make a suggestion or a request, is line 432, and I would have it say the board chair shall call standing committee meetings. The chair doesn't really schedule, go into the details of scheduling, but meetings are at the call of the chair. So I would prefer to have that language.
Yeah, that's good.
Everyone's okay with that.
Okay, AAG Buse, your hand's raised.
I'm taking it down, I'm sorry.
We're still into this.
So what you're saying is that, oh shoot, now it's, what is this, 5? Item number 5. You're saying that covers and that it refers to where all those definitions are. So there's no need to, it's line 544 through 46. And that has all those outlined. See, now that would have shortened up that conversation had I read that policy a lot sooner.
Well, we're learning. Vice Chair Belknap?
Yeah, I think part of that is that this also happened in standards and assessment discussion as well, and that we are going to need to go back into our policy and make sure that that is clean. That will come after this and have more clarity. Thank you.
Perfect. So as long as it's mentioned here, then that will point to that policy in the future.
True. Board Member Moss, I think you had a concern. 6.
Yeah, question on what's now line 547. And this kind of is tied into the advisory committee. At least as I understand it, those advisory committees that fall under that policy 1004, whatever it is, would normally be created by vote of the full board, if I'm understanding that correctly. And no, so maybe my concern was, so maybe that addresses it. my concern was that if the full board approved the creation of an advisory committee, it didn't seem that the board chair alone, and I talked to Chair Huntsman about this, and this didn't go to his leadership, but as an institutional matter, it seemed odd that if the board had voted to create, that the board chair alone could vote to dissolve, because they didn't find it effective or necessary. That seemed to me that it would come back to whoever created it.
And I didn't take offense to the question. So, and I was anxious if those that were writing, if they had a comment on that number 6.
We did not. We were comfortable with that you had voted the board chair into that position and given him that authority, or her that authority, whoever it might be at the time. But this is language that was already there. We did not change that.
And I'm trying to look back at any examples while I've chaired where I've just ended something. And I think I've done it once or twice because the committee never had a reason to meet and it was done. But I think I might have done it once. I can't recall.
Miss Lorraine, can you think of a time? Because I was thinking that it was the board chair, but I could be off base, and he's totally on target.
No, the chair has determined the ending dates for committees in the past.
And
Practice, perhaps. It does say in policy, though, that I believe the board creates all the groups.
So if a group responded or did their work, they made recommendations, they reported or whatever, the way that I'm seeing it, so it appears their work is done, then I would say, okay, thank you, and shoot out a letter and thank them for the work, and it's done. And then I've done that. This, or if it's in our bylaws that the board will do that, then I need to just make sure that after the report and things are done, that there's another motion, I guess, to end that group.
I think that's more appropriate. I would hate to be, I just think it puts the chair at risk when you can unilaterally just, I mean, I understand the efficiency, but it could go as simple as, on the consent calendar or something, just to protect the chair too. You don't want, I mean, something so easy, you don't want to just leave the chair out there exposed, I don't know.
I can't imagine our chair arbitrarily dismissing an advisory group before their work is done. Just as a policy matter, it would seem to me that if the board appoints, the board ought to at least have awareness if someone's determined or taken an opinion that their work is done. Some of them, I think, as Mark was explaining, you have an end date, and so you've got a 2-year period, and then it wraps up, and you say thank you very much. But in the event that there might be some difference of opinion about whether that should stay, it seems better that the board chair would recommend it to the board and say, we haven't met for 6 months and it's on consent, and so therefore if anybody does, well, somebody objects, that kind of thing. But in case there's a difference of opinion, that would give the board a chance to weigh in.
I don't have any issue with it, and those that put it together, I don't see any reason that it has to be there, but that will just be the next process. As if somebody finished or reported, then we make sure there's a motion to end. It's okay. Can we? I think we're good. I didn't have anyone else. Brian, you're up. AG Quisenberry, you have,
You're muted.
Can you not, can anyone hear me?
I can,
Oh, now,
now we got you.
No.
No, I don't. Now you're digital. Into my ears.
It's your internet that's the problem.
Can you guys hear him?
no,
Can you hear me?
No.
I'll go to your house with it. Agree. Hold on.
We don't have you.
You,
Hey, Brian, we're not getting you.
don't hear me, huh? All right. Yes. Okay. All right. Just
Got you
go
now.
down. I'm so sorry. All right. Looks like now it's working. I'll try and be real fast here before my internet crashes. So in subsection 1M, Ben, are you able to get that? Let's see, 1M, there it is, on line 477. Says the board shall record and live stream all standing committee meetings on the internet. It seems like that's a little redundant with, let's see, 1J, little 2I, B. There it is right there. 2B, 450. Whoa, wait, stop. 452 talks about recording as well. So I would suggest we just on that 452, it just say standing committee meetings will be staffed by a secretary assigned, and just delete recorded and. Again, because that reference to recording the meetings seems to me contained in subsection M.
Brian,
If you want,
just a little comment on that. There are instances where you may not have technology to stream, but you still need to record that meeting. So I think the recording does need to be in there.
Well, M requires the recording as well.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Thank you.
It says the board shall record and live stream. So the reference to recording is twice.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
All right, Ben, subsection 3B.
Wait just a minute. Brian. Go back to that. Because we're going to record this. The board shall record all standing committee meetings and live stream where internet facilities and technology will allow it. I think you have to record it and then you will live stream if technology allows for it. Is that correct, Lorraine?
Yes, I like that. That clarifies that
You have to record
you
it.
have to record. So I like separating those a little bit, maybe.
Okay.
Just as-
So the board shall
Semicolon.
record all standing committees meetings and live stream where the internet and facilities allow for it. Thank you. Sorry, Brian.
No, I like that. That's good. And live stream them. Okay. If that looks good, then my next comment is in subsection 3B. Let's see, there it is. Okay, so line 509, it has a process for audit committee, and then membership and selection are capitalized. I don't think they need to be capitalized, so I would suggest it's lowercase m and lowercase s. And then on 513, it refers to audit committee, and we've previously capitalized audit and committee, capital A, capital C. So to be consistent, I would recommend capitalizing audit and then committee. And then the same thing on line 515, capitalizing audit and committee. And then in 517, attend a committee. Committee's capitalized. I don't think it needs to be capitalized. And Chair, that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions, concerns, proposed edits? I got everything off my list. Okay. Without any questions or comments, concerns, I'm seeking a motion that the committee approve article and forward recommendations to the board for final approval as amended.
I'll move.
Thank you, Board Member Moss. Is there any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I,
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are to Article 9. I don't have any red ink or blue ink or anything on my article. So board members, questions or comments or concerns?
I added a comma after the statute in that first paragraph. I think that's needed to set that off.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
I was wondering about E and F under number 1. I don't know. I just wondered why we couldn't say, I mean, why are we separating out printed media to recruit candidates and then determining means of advertising the position? Like, I don't know, just seemed kind of clunky there. Why wouldn't we determine the need for preparation of printed media to advertise and recruit candidates? Or why are we even, well, it's not even printed media, it's media. Why is there a separate item for E?
I have no answer. It was already there. This is not something.
Yeah, and I can recall, I was very fortunate early in my boardmanship, however we say that, to be able to chair that committee, and I followed this religiously.
Yeah, and I just, I don't know, again, it just seemed a little clunky.
So on E, I checked every box when I'm doing it, but even in the E, determine the need for preparation of printed material to recruit candidates. We through the way we were advertising back then, there was still agency publications that we wanted to put this out in, that circulated all over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it goes into Ed Week and it goes into, other superintendent read materials. I think that E is part of F.
Well, I look at this and think this is just a recruit applications, where F is the actual screening.
Yeah,
of
so I
any.
actually thought that E should include the advertising and recruiting of candidates. And then F should just be, and F and G should be combined. So you're establishing a screening and establishing, and E should be the advertising, F should be the screening.
And should they all have, oh, I don't want to steal Brian's thunder, but should we take the INGs off all of those?
Yes.
You taught me well, Brian.
Way this is-
Mark, you missed your opportunity.
I know,
Because if you read that, which may include establish the hiring, that doesn't read right. You want establishing, determining, I think, on this one. Just the way the previous paragraph is worded.
Yeah, I agree with Ben on that one.
And we could put under F, determine means of advertising include, I mean, if you want printed material, or if you want the word recruit, I don't know if when you're looking for a state superintendent, if you are including recruiting activities, not just advertising. Advertising is putting it out there. Recruiting is more actively seeking out certain candidates. So, but that goes together. And then G has to do with the screening process. I just think it's
so.
more modern.
So this is all recall to me. And I was very young and new on the board on this. And so the E was relevant on the recruiting, the original spot, because we did an advertisement as we were putting all this out, and then people wanted to know next steps. What are we going to do? And we had our process in our advertisement. And then we actually, based on the results of our advertisement, it seems like, well, we went F before we would do the old E. We had F already defined. So I see where you're at. I'm agreeing with you.
I think that somewhere we had to keep media in there. And one of the reasons being is because these are lots of times put out in media in other states, in other places. And so maybe, I think we maybe need that somewhere, and I do not think printed media. So determining the means of advertising, maybe.
Through media?
Or maybe
The means of advertising
maybe
through
advertising
media?
would cover. Do you think, Molly, that advertising covers media? I think,
Yes.
okay.
That's
we'll call
where
it
you put, that's where you put your advertising.
Okay, got it. I'm in.
If you don't have media, then you don't have advertising.
But advertising generally has a dollar value attached to it, and not all recruiting through media is purchased advertising.
True.
That would still be your recruiting strategy, right? Or it'd be the means of advertising.
It seems to me you have two different things. You have the advertisement itself, and you have the means of advertising. So you're kind of taking one of those things out. There's the preparation of the job announcement that needs to be a step in there. And then how are you going to advertise it? What means are you going to use through? So I think you're skipping one step.
So if you said your advertising strategy, then you're not talking just about your means. You're talking about the whole plan. You need an advertising plan. Really, at this point, you call a consultant and
Well, or is it, and when I think plan, I think marketing plan. This is a pursuit plan. So
Yeah,
Recruitment plan.
really good at, I mean, I wish maybe it would be good to have someone from HR to better define this part here to be in compliance with what's happened in that HR world.
I like that idea. We could run that by them. Also, there's an extra space and A.
Don't go too far yet, because I
I'm
think we need
not,
to
it's
fix
just
this
right
one a
there.
little.
It's on my screen.
Oh, you got it.
It's
Oh,
right there
after
in A,
criteria?
after hiring and before goals.
Line 565.
Yes, thank you.
So can we go back to this one? And what about determining, no, establish, wait. Determining the advertising and recruiting plans. Period. We already are going for the position.
Mhm,
Determining the advertising and recruiting plans.
period.
Period.
It'll get me in trouble. Instead of plans, strategy
Strategies.
Strategies, great.
is
We like strategies.
broader than I don't know.
Yep.
Which would encompass whatever options and opportunities we have available to get the words out, to put it in a strategy.
Yep, and it would also include the means.
So have I got that where you want it?
I'm
I
rereading.
like.
G seems a little bit wordy.
Lorraine, will you put a note to self for me to get with Michelle on this, to just, if there's a proposed betterment, that we're prepared to bring it forward in our board meeting?
And Kristen, I'm with you. What about establishing a screening and interviewing process and forwarding the list?
Yeah.
And forwarding the finalists to the board?
Wait, at some point you have to do it, though.
Maybe we should have an H.
I think you should have an H. Next step.
Because you've got to have a process then,
And then there's a to-do.
and then interviewing candidates and forwarding. And I do like I think you almost have to say, I know you're taking out, Ben, but somehow you need to make sure that it's the candidates you have on the list that you're forwarding. There must be some reason that was there. I can't tell you why.
Amber, on that, what are you looking at? Which part?
H,
The screen
interviewing
candidates?
screened candidates. Why do you think it says screened?
Because not everyone gets an interview. As you screen those, some don't fit the criteria, so you're not going to interview every candidate. So maybe we could word that a little bit different, but there's that first process is the screening process, which narrows it to those that there's some that may not fit the
Got it.
criteria. You don't even need to
Yeah,
interview.
so that to fit the law, you don't have to interview all 7,000 applicants.
Or the one that would want this job.
Yeah, I think screening is fine. And then if there's a better word, then our HR department will help us, and we can put that in as a proposed amendment. But I'd like the intent that where this is going. Okay. Was there other concerns on this?
Hold on.
Ryan, you're with
Uh,
us. You're not with us very well. We're not hearing you. You're kind of digital again. Are you standing by your window?
He's on mute.
It's on mute now.
There we go.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah,
Oh,
Are you-
okay.
I thought I heard you trying to join us.
Yes, I didn't know if the other board members were done or not, with their revisions. If so, I just have a couple of punctuation ones, just real quick. On line 565, Ben, there's a space before the semicolon. And then in subsection B, C, D, and the others, they end with a period, whereas subsection A ends with a semicolon. And I think in this context, you're going to want to end everything with a semicolon instead of a period, because it's not a complete sentence. That would be my recommendation. And then because we've deleted subsection E there on 572, subsection F on 574 is actually going to be E. And then so on 574, Ben, the F, oh, if it'll automatically correct it, then that's fine. And then let's see, if you scroll down to keep going, all right, there are 583 subsection C, interim. I don't think needs to be capitalized on 583. It's not capitalized on 584. So I would suggest that's lowercase. And then just a little bit further down on line 588. It has direct employees capitalized. I don't think that needs to be capitalized. It wasn't earlier in this document. And Chair, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any other proposed changes? I'm not hearing anyone from the group. You want to scan from the top, beginning through this? Okay. Okay.
Chair?
Yes.
To me, the language in, go back up to 2, Ben, if you would. I think the language in this, and this is an ad, I believe, or maybe it's not an ad, is a little clunky, including USDB is administered. There's something about the wording that just doesn't seem to flow right. Brian, does that, Brian, Michelle, anyone of the grammarians? It just doesn't seem to.
Right.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, that's what's been in question is.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Thank you, Lorraine.
And can I ask a question too? Is the advisory committee changed at the USDB or is it still in 800?
It
We
was-
actually, that gets moved to board policy, I think effective July 1st. It is because of the legislature made that change. So I think,
That's what I thought. So I'm wondering if when we approve this, if we need to say with the removal of B on July 1st.
Yeah, but what if we referred to,
Just refer to the, but we won't have the policy yet, or maybe we could get to the policy. I just don't want to miss that and then have to come open these back up again.
There actually is a policy already in place that maybe needs to be updated, but there is a policy, board policy 4002.
Okay,
So maybe
USDB
we can
Advisory
do-
Council.
So can we do something there, Ben? I don't know if we can cross it out, but I just wanted to be conscious of that.
So, yeah, I think that'll work.
Have we already, I don't know. Shouldn't we be putting USDB in parentheses after Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind? Or not? So right there, shouldn't we be putting in parentheses USDB?
Okay, the grammar police are nodding yes.
I'm not the grammar police. That would be two other people here.
Well, normally, well, isn't that where you just,
You use an acronym, you needed to introduce
it
it
in.
with the full language.
Yes.
okay,
Well, I don't understand. There's something about 598 and 602. No, I don't know, maybe it's the order of the items. It seems to be kind of jumbled up a little bit. Like, couldn't this make more sense in a different order?
what would be
I'm thinking,
earlier?
it just
Maybe the
said
advisory committee should have their own because they're all about the superintendent, except that one. Except the advisory council, they're all about the superintendent.
yeah, there's something here that's wonky. It's like we put a whole bunch of stuff in the,
So if you took 2C out, and then the rest of them is all about the superintendent, right?
well, it's all about the governance.
A is just about governance. It doesn't refer to the.
It's
superintendent.
not, yeah, I don't think 596 should be the heading. I think 598 should be the heading. And then, so governance and control is by the board. The board appoints a superintendent, because then you can include the advisory council because it is part of the governance.
What a beautiful thing you found.
Well, that's being tweaked. I'm sure all of our things in statute and rule are triple checked or double checked.
You know, Michelle spent hours and hours on this, but that doesn't mean we couldn't make an error.
I'm just thinking between now and then also that
I'm happy to go back and check them before a board meeting. I will do that.
okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm
Ben?
glad you're gonna do that.
Ben, when we're all done, will you send me a copy of the changes and I'll go through and check it before board meeting?
Yes, I will.
And just so you know, the advisory council is also under the appointments section in section 10. So I don't know that you need it here as well.
The only reason that it would be here is if we're trying to make the point that, I mean, and I don't know, I don't like things duplicated, but if you're trying to make the point that the governance needs to be not just a superintendent or not just that it needs to be a joint, it needs to, I mean, I don't know.
Well, the advisory council doesn't govern. They're advisory to the USDB and the board.
I like that point, Lorraine. That redundancy.
I,
I think we're
yeah.
safe keeping it in its own spot. I don't think we need this spot to remind us that we have a advisory council.
The thing is that we just agreed to use their advisory council as their school community council, and they are giving increased powers. But yeah, I think it should be struck, but that advisory council is now their land trust body. And so therefore does have quite a bit of responsibility.
I'm just, where was it best to remind us of that?
Probably not here.
And I would recommend on 602, the reference to superintendent, so we don't get that confused with the state superintendent, is to make that lowercase. Because it's uppercase in 594, and that's referring to Sid. So the lowercase in 602 would be Joel.
So when we reference that, let me just say thank you, but to board members' heart's concern here, where we reference the advisory council in that other place, can we reference it as the advisory council and, or somehow a little reference to
Community council.
the community council?
I might would, just because I know that school community councils are supposed to be advisory, but they're a
Just
little bit more than advisory.
But we've already moved past that, but a note to self or Lorraine
For the board meeting.
follow up and
Chair Huntsman, on line 602, it says USDB is administered by the superintendent. What if we put USDB is administered by the USDB superintendent? And I know that's kind of an odd thing, but
No, I think
below
it's
it,
better.
we called it again, the USDB superintendent. Then it's the same.
I didn't know that little trick with the little s and the big S, and I keep running into that problem, like when I was reviewing policies regarding, in particular, land trust, and I never really understood which superintendent was approving what, whether it was a local superintendent or the state superintendent. So I do think that some clarity around that would be helpful.
So would we also on line C, 605, change the superintendent to a lowercase? USDB superintendent, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments or concerns? I'm not seeing any. This was well, those were some good catches and good proposed betterments for clarity. Thank you. I think we still have everybody still with us here. Let me fix my screen again so I can see all our, yeah, we still have everybody. Okay. Thank you, Ben. Maybe, well, I guess at this time, I'm seeking a motion that the committee approve Article 9 and forward recommendations to the board for final approval as amended.
So moved.
Okay. Any discussion to the motion? Thank you, Board Member Norton. Seeing none, we'll vote at this time. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. Committee, thank you for your work and preparation that you've made in reading through these. I don't know how we feel as a committee, but I would, as the committee chair, I'd like to reach out to all of those in your behalf and shoot out a shout out and a thank you for all of the 50+ hours of work and putting these together, and then also shout out to the other committee members for their work, and looking forward to having these bylaws come before the board in our next board meeting and get them implemented. It's a good guiding document, so thank you. But without objection, I'll figure a way to shoot out some shout outs and thank you.
I really appreciate that they were so well thought out, and we didn't have to have a second meeting, so good job, committee.
Well,
They
I
really
didn't-
were well.
Uh-oh,
Well
Mark
written
might be
and-
calling a second committee.
No, I'm not.
Oh,
No, we're good. But I think as they were sorted out and that our lift was maybe a little easier than some of the others on some of those topics. So
Yeah.
not that we're any, but I sure appreciate your work and effort, and without objection.
Thank you, Laura, and everybody else. Yeah, thank you all for digging through. That's a
Yes.
lot of moving pieces that have to intersect in the right way. So thank you for tackling the jigsaw puzzle.
Well, that's why it's so great to have committees, because now you've cleaned up our messes, and that's why we're such a good group.
You know, this is again about progress and not perfection. So I just know, just from my previous experiences as a board member, that this clarity that I'm seeing as things are moving forward definitely will better our group of 15. So thanks again for your effort. Thank you, staff, and all those that have been on here. This will conclude our meeting, and until we meet again, thank you, take care, and be safe.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
thank you, everyone.
Great
Thanks,
job.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.